Hello, I'm Bruce DuPoit. Coming up today on News Talk, the debate over birthright citizenship. Should babies born on U.S. soil automatically be considered Americans? A growing chorus of conservatives says no. They say pregnant women should not be able to time their deliveries to game the immigration system. We'll hear opposing views today as we talk with Arlington Supervisor Walter Tejada and with John Fear of the Center for Immigration Studies. Your calls included. Then, just weeks before his visit to the U.S., Pope Francis announces that women who've had abortions can be forgiven by their parish priest. Reaction to the Pope's statement and a preview of his swing through the U.S. as we talk with a local reporter who covers the church.
From WJLA, this is News Talk with Bruce DuPoit.
So good to have you with us on this Wednesday here in the nation's capital. I'm Bruce DuPoit. We have a great show for you today. The Republican Party's raucous 2016 primary has brought to the surface an idea once considered settled: birthright citizenship. The notion that if you're born on U.S. soil, you're an American. Critics say the Constitution is being misused right now to provide non-citizens an end run around the nation's immigration rules and regulations. Given the passions on both sides of this issue, the discussion is likely to be with us a while. Here's a sampling of the opinion we found in conversation with area residents.
I do think it needs to remain the same. It's that diversity, that policy that is attracted to the country, which makes the country strong. I lived for 8 years in the Cayman Islands where there is no birthright citizenship. My son was born there. He had no legal rights there as a citizen in that country. And I can't tell you how disenfranchising that is. America has a competitive advantage by giving citizenship to those who are born here.
Europe does it differently. A number of countries in Europe, but I think it's been worked out fine for the United States. It's in the Constitution now. Changing it would be an enormous effort, and I don't think it's worthwhile.
Joining us now, two men with opposing views. Walter Tejada is a member of the Arlington Board. John Fear is a policy analyst at the Center for Immigration Studies. Welcome to you both. Thanks very much for your time today. John Fear, why is this issue in the public square now?
Well, it's actually been a debate that's been brewing for quite some time. Back in 1993, Senator Harry Reid introduced a bill to narrow the scope of immigration interpretation of the 14th Amendment, to narrow it to include citizens, children of citizens, and children of permanently domiciled immigrants. And I think that the issue came into prominence simply because of the fact that we have experienced more illegal immigration than ever before, and we've also seen this growing phenomenon of birth tourism where people come from abroad, they lie to our visa officials, they say they're here for a temporary stay to visit Disneyland or what have you, but they're actually here to add a U.S. passport holder to the family. That is fraud, and I think Americans are wanting to see our government respond to it.
What thoughts do you have when you listen to the statements that we just heard? We were out for quite some time yesterday. We went to a couple different places, tried to get a sampling of views, and for whatever reason, and we can get into it later, the comments that we got were pretty much uniformly in favor of the status quo. What thoughts do you have when you hear what we just heard?
Well, the recent polling on this shows that 65% of Americans would like to see an end to this broad application of the citizenship clause. So maybe this area has a lot of people who are more favorable of the status quo. But I think when you actually ask people about the process and how it operates, do you think a person who comes here as a temporary foreign student or a tourist, should that person be able to give birth to a U.S. citizen? I think you start to see the results a little bit differently.
Walter Tejada, is the system we have one that should be kept? Is it one that should be altered? What thoughts do you have?
Sure. First, there they go again. The band of ultra-conservatives trying to target U.S.-born children of undocumented immigrants. This is not new. It's been tried before, and every time it's failed. I think that the U.S. Constitution is pretty clear, and it's very simple language. Everyone born in U.S. soil is a United States citizen. And so that, I think, it's the bottom line is simple language. And I know that we all know there's a political campaign for election, and the part of the Republican Party has been using very hateful anti-immigrant rhetoric that really is inciting other people to take hateful action against immigrants, and it's simply wrong.
Harry Reid is not just a Democrat, he's a leader among Democrats in the Senate. If he thought this issue was worth addressing, and if he thought our current policy in this area needed a tweak, a change, some sort of alteration? Does that take it out of the partisan realm? Is it unfair to say this is something that only one party or one point on the political spectrum takes issue with?
That was what view more than 20 years ago? One view?
One view.
More than 20 years ago. The view today is different. I think that as Democrats have coalesced and united, and we know that by and large the vast majority of Americans support immigration reform, which is really what we should be talking about if there is a concern with issues of a broken immigration system. So we have now in place, I think, a system where it's clear that anyone born in U.S. soil is a United States citizen. And for more than 115 years, the United States Supreme Court has affirmed that clause in the 14th Amendment stands for what it says.
You were shaking your head, John, a second ago as Walter spoke.
Yeah, it's not as clear as all children born in the U.S. are U.S. citizens. Clearly, the 14th Amendment has limiting language. It says all children born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States are U.S. citizens. So the debate is, what does subject to the jurisdiction mean? And if you go back and you look at the floor statements that were held in Congress back in 1868, obviously the issues of illegal immigration and birth tourism weren't on anyone's radar. But they were talking about the issue of allegiance and whether or not these individuals had full allegiance to the United States. I think it's hard to argue that Congress ever intended such a broad interpretation of the 14th Amendment.
A lot is being said and a lot is being written about this issue right now. I want to share with you and with the folks watching us at home right now something that columnist Clarence Page said. It's in his syndicated column. We found this in the Omaha paper at omaha.com. He says, quote, critics of birthright citizenship argue that the 14th Amendment was intended to protect the rights of slaves, not immigrants. But, as reporter Amanda Turkle recently recounted in the Huffington Post, birthright citizenship came up during the amendment's spirited legislative debate as well. Yet it passed without exceptions for immigrants. Later, the progress/backlash cycle resumed as economic fears led to passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which stopped Chinese immigration and barred Chinese in America from becoming citizens. But in 1898, the Supreme Court affirmed in the case of Wong Kim Ark that immigrants' children born in the U.S. are entitled to citizenship.
Well, on the issue of that last holding, first off, there are a number of holdings that we skip over there, but that holding was specifically for children of permanently domiciled legal immigrants. So I think it's true that now, if you're a child of a U.S. citizen or a child of a permanently domiciled legal immigrant, the issue's settled. But there has never been any debate about whether or not this includes children of tourists, children of foreign students, for example. And I think that debate should take place. Also, don't forget that in 1924, Congress then extended the scope to include American Indians. It hasn't done the same for other classes of immigrants or other classes of people. It could if it wanted to, I suppose, but it hasn't.
Walter Tejada, is John right?
Well, the citizenship clause was adopted in the wake of the infamous Dred Scott decision, which was to foreclose the possibility of an unequal class system of people born in the United States. So what the Republican Party with Trump and company are trying to do is make the United States some sort of country club, as is only a privilege for certain people, and you deny and some others that are maybe inconvenient that you might not like. So it's completely wrong. The Supreme Court indeed has looked at it, has affirmed for over 115 years that it is exactly what our founders of our country wanted it to be.
Phone lines open as we discuss this issue today here on News Talk. We'd love to get your thoughts, your questions, and your opinions into the mix. 703-387-1020, that's our number. We can take calls in the 11 a.m. hour. That's when we're live. Do join the conversation. The number's at the bottom of the screen. Dial now, please, and we'll get to as many of your calls as time permits. We hear Supervisor Tejada about people who come to the Los Angeles area or other parts of the country late in a pregnancy. They stay in a hotel and they have a child, and the timing is not accidental. The suspicion is that families, couples, whomever, time the delivery process to create an opportunity for a family that's not American now to gain citizenship. If that's an issue, A, do you accept that that happens? And B, Is it worth a look for us as a nation?
We have some of the best law enforcement in the world, and those type of incidents ought to be investigated, and whatever punishment needs to be merited for those acts that might be not according to law, well then, those have to stand on their merit. I think that what we do have is a system in the United States where if someone is here and they have a child is a United States citizen. That's what the foundation of our Constitution calls for. And it's interesting that when you have situations like that, and compared to gun violence, for example, we don't hear any movement to amend the Constitution so that only law enforcement and people in the military that protect us can carry weapons. You never hear that type of amending of the Constitution so that we can reduce gun violence. And the preposterous, that might sound to some who support guns, that is how preposterous it sounds for those of us who hear this birthright citizenship being denied, or this anchor baby stuff that people like to throw around, just as preposterous. So it's a bad conversation.
Well, the argument is that Congress can't pass legislation to clarify the scope of the 14th Amendment. But clearly, if we want to use the Second Amendment as an example, Congress is constantly passing legislation to clarify the scope of the Second Amendment. Why can they do that for one amendment but not the other? That's an argument I haven't heard a response to. As to birth tourism, we estimate there's about 36,000 birth tourists per year. It's happening. It's a phenomenon that's spreading across the globe. We see birth tourists from Turkey, from Russia, from China, from Nigeria. It's a global phenomenon. It's growing, and Congress is going to have to address it at some point.
Talking with John Fear and Walter Tejada. A quick break here. Back, though, with more News Talk for this Wednesday, right after this.